Hello, everybody, and welcome to our very first FashMash Pioneers virtually. This is a well-established monthly speaker series where Rachel Arthur, my co-founder of FashMash, and I bring together the world's brightest minds to dissect the future of the fashion industry. For those new here today, we founded FashMash 8 years ago with a business mission that remains as relevant and important now as it was back then, to encourage open conversation and sharing of ideas to drive the industry forward. Like all of our community, we have had to pivot our business due to the pandemic. This speaker series typically attracts over 150 ticket holders in real time in a physical event space. Obviously, that has had to be put on hold for the foreseeable. Instead, today we are joining you via Zoom. Thank you all so much for joining. This virtual Pioneers needed a very unique and special kickoff. So for the first time ever, we are going to be welcoming not one, but 4 leaders of industry. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit the UK, London-based designers Bethany Williams, Holly Fulton, and Phoebe English recognised they could do something to help. Alongside Cosette McCreary, they formed the Emergency Designer Network, a volunteer-led enterprise that has been galvanising local production to make key garments for the NHS. And we all know how crucial that is. Since early March, they have been working with small UK manufacturers and designers to send scrubs to hospitals to help them in the fight against coronavirus. Just in the last half hour, I have had an update from Holly, and I can say that they have made 6,700 sets of scrubs for the NHS. It's a really impressive figure. It is also an incredible example of cross-industry collaboration, which brings us to our topic today. My co-founder Rachel will be interviewing the 4 designers, the 4 pioneers, of course, all about their work in the crisis and what collaboration stands for them in terms of the industry's sustainable future. Moreover, as early signs of the pandemic begin to slow, green shoots perhaps, what does this collaborative future mean for the industry? It's hard to summarize the careers of these 4 fantastic women of fashion, but I'm going to try. First of all, taking it from the top alphabetically, Bethany Williams. She is a designer who advocates social change through her collections. She founded her label in 2017, and in just those 3 short years, she has gained serious accolades in the industry. She was the 2nd recipient of the Queen Elizabeth II Award for British Designer in 2019, an honour that recognises talent, community values, and sustainable processes. She sources second-hand fabrics to create 100% recycled garments for her projects. Next, Cosette Mccreary is a connector and brand ambassador for Iceberg. Collaboration has always been a key part of her MO. She ran the much-loved Maverick knitwear label Sibling from 2008 to 2017. I'm sure many of you have fond memories of that label. She's also renowned as a music tastemaker, DJing from boombox to pony step. Holly Fulton established her label in 2009, winning everything from a British Fashion Award to Elle Designer of the Year. Her work is known for bold graphics, 3D motifs, and she's worked across both clothing and accessories. Her jewellery has gained particular renown. Finally, Phoebe English founded her label in 2011. The brand is made entirely in the UK, and it aims to eradicate any virgin materials unless they are certified, using excess waste materials to make for the majority of the collections. Her passion for sustainability is infectious. I can say this firsthand, having met her. The WhatsApp group that she founded has gained such renown in the industry. It brings together industry leaders and designers to discuss sustainability and to cross-collaborate across WhatsApp and share ideas. I'll now hand over to my co-founder, Rachel, our chair and interviewer for today. before I do, a couple of notices. First of all, please do ask questions. As usual, we're going to be having our usual Q&A format at the end of the discussion. You can use the Q&A button, which is at the bottom of your screen. If you just like to chat amongst attendees, you can use the chat button at the bottom of your screen, or of course do so on social platforms with the hashtag FashMash. So thank you all very much for joining, and I will now hand over to Rachel and our 4 pioneers. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Rosanna. If I can invite our 4 panelists to please join me on screen with their video. There we go. Excellent. Great. I think we have one more with Phoebe. Phoebe, are you there? Excellent. There we go. Brilliant. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. It's such a pleasure to have you here. Rosanna has obviously already outlined who you all are. And honestly, it feels such a pleasure to have 4 incredible people on this call, but especially to have 4 incredible women. So thank you so much for giving up your time and joining this virtual conversation. We've already heard from Rosanna a bit about the Emergency Designer Network and what it is, but I'd love to hear a bit more detail. So Holly, maybe I can come to you first. How did it come about? Maybe we can start there.
Yeah, I think it started as a very reactive thing. I, as an individual, a very small sort of individual designer, was being approached directly by hospitals asking to help them with the manufacturing of PPE, and immediately alarm bells started ringing for me when that happened. This was kind of back sort of in the start of March, mid-March. I was trying to sort of think what I could do about this quite quickly, and immediately kind of thought of Phoebe, because I was aware that she had a really large sustainability database that she kind of utilised for potentially situations not like this, but, you know, to kind of galvanise information and bring people together. So I kind of connected with her. Bethany and Phoebe had already been sort of discussing this as they'd had similar approaches. So it kind of made sense to us to collectively join together and try as at that point as a 3 to sort of get some traction and see what we could do in terms of manufacturing. We then kind of spent probably about 2.5 to 3 weeks liaising with Make It British and Fashion Roundtable, with Whitehall, with the NHS, trying to see sort of what the best direction would be. It became quite clear that the kind of certification and the regulations that are in position were not going to relax at all to kind of facilitate non-sterilised factories producing PPE, etc. So we decided at that point in time that there would be a route A, which was more industry focused, and a route B, which would be the local kind of contribution, if you like, and that we would be galvanising route B. At that stage, we also brought Cosette, came into the picture as well to assist us with basically with everything. But we kind of, it sort of gained momentum quite quickly. So we'd initially sort of planned to have 10 designers on board to work on this. There's now over 150 designers and brands part of it. And it became apparent that we needed some assistance with sort of managing the media, with fundraising, with liaising with PRs within companies to get sponsorship and support. So Cosette was really fundamental in kind of instigating that role for us and sort of completing the set of skills that we had, if you like, as a group to sort of make this happen quite swiftly.
How incredible. And correct me if I'm wrong, Rosanna said it was 6,700 and something that you've now made. So that's across the 100 designers that you've just mentioned.
Yeah, I think it was one thing that we had as a real sort of mission statement from the start was that we wanted this to be a completely inclusive setup. So it didn't matter if someone could make 20 sets of scrubs or 2,000 sets of scrubs. There was still a position for them within the framework that we were creating, because as much as it's addressing a really, you know, a fundamentally urgent need within the NHS, it's also about generating positivity within our industry. And at a time where fashion is going to be quite profoundly affected by the current sort of financial situation and the longer term landscape is going to be different, it was about also giving individuals something tangible to physically do within that time to help their mental health and to sort of help their interaction with each other and create a larger network that we could hopefully continue outside of COVID-19 to sort of create something longer term that's a positive move for us as designers within the UK.
Amazing. I'd love to come back to that idea of this positive move and the view for the longer term. But Cosette, to come to you first as the master of all of these moving pieces then, what's the response been like? I mean, obviously we've seen tons of incredible press coverage, but sort of from in the heart of it, how's it been?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always like, that's that's sort of like my job. I tend to get brought on by, I mean, I think Rosanna mentioned Iceberg at the beginning. James Long brought me on board to kind of give him some support, and then that organically grew to me talking to other people in commercial, and and like feeling out the entire business almost, to then feed back to the individuals and make sure that everybody was on the same page and everybody was kind of working as one. So that's sort of the same practice that I bring to EDN and to everywhere else. And I think what's been incredible is that, working alongside everybody has such a good name and a good standing within the industry, that when we put out calls for help or calls for donations, people react to it very swiftly and and it's not pressurized. We don't pressurize people to come on board or sew or or find fabric or what have you. People want to do it, so that's really great. A lot of that is down to like friendships and old relationships that we all have. And then another thing that I found was really amazing was that it was, on the whole, it was like the PR side of bigger companies such as Youth Net-a-Porter or Matches, for example, who were actually coming on board to help us out. And both of them ended up helping us with our courier service. So it wasn't even people working within their own job description. It was people thinking outside of what they would normally do, but based on the fact that they could see there was a problem and they just really wanted to help. And that's been very empowering to be part of.
Yeah, empowering. It must be incredibly rewarding as well. That insight's incredible. Thank you, Bethany. It seems like there's been or this has opened up a real world of possibility in terms of if we think about things a little bit differently and how we approach them, through this collaborative lens. Has it changed some of the ways that you all think about how to work together?
Yeah, I think it's just been, for me, quite inspiring. Just like we kind of came together because of like a problem, and I think like designers are problem solvers. So I think, yeah, it's just been really beautiful to see all the support and responses we've had from press teams, publications, brands, like sponsorships, our GoFundMe page. It's just been like quite an amazing experience to see the fashion industry come together, because at the end of the day we're making garments, when we all have that knowledge of garment making, and especially within the UK. So it's kind of, it was just kind of bringing that together. But I think it's just been a really amazing experience to see like how well received it's been, and seeing like the care and kindness from the UK fashion industry. Yeah,
it must feel very heartwarming indeed. Collaboration obviously is the theme of today's conversation, and as you say, there's some really nice examples of it happening with this work specifically, but it does actually seem like a bit of a red thread through all of your work in other capacities before this, and I'm sure ongoing. Phoebe, to turn to you on this first, as Rosanna mentioned, you have what's becoming increasingly well known through the WhatsApp group, which is called Fashion on Earth. I'm very privileged to be a part of it and find it the most incredible community that you've pulled together. Can you just share a little bit more about it, and importantly what it's hoping to achieve, so that our audience can learn about that?
Yeah, sure. Fashion on Earth started a bit like this actually, and has sort of snowballed into something much bigger than was ever planned. But I'm really pleased to hear you find it a productive and useful space. There was a group of us. I invited a group of designers to the studio maybe a year, two years ago. I can't remember, Bethany, can you? It was a while ago.
Yeah, I think it was last year. We came to your studio.
It feels like a really long time ago now. It was just, I think I've got 25 seats in the studio, and I think every seat was being used, so there must have been 25 of us. And I just invited everyone over just to share my database. that I'd been compiling of suppliers and packaging options, biodegradable packaging options, non-plastic packaging options, organic fabrics, etc. It seemed like a natural progression to, you know, fashion designers are always quite busy. It's quite hard for them to leave their studio and travel to the other side of London to see people face to face. So it made sense in terms of time and efficiency to be able to share those things digitally. I already had another WhatsApp group called Earth, which was just one that was full of my family members and my friends. And yeah, it just made sense to call that one Fashion on Earth, and it was a space for those 25 designers just to exchange knowledge and information in a place where it had a mixture of really well-established designers that had been working in sustainable ways for decades and people that were brand new to it, such as myself, just as a really quick way to be doing things in a better way and to be, you know, be aiming for best practice. Fashion had, you know, become to be quite out of step to the realities of our situation as a species, and this was just a way to kind of be able to support and encourage particularly small designers that have got small, agile sized companies that were able to, you know, implement change to their practices quite quickly, even though they might not have big budgets. So yeah, again, it was, and then it's sort of snowballed, and now it's full of these sort of world famous, you know, sustainability consultants have made whole lifetimes of expertise on this subject. So it's a real mixture now. But really, the nature of that was collaboration. You know, I think there has in the past been an emphasis maybe on seeing other businesses as competitors. Often when you apply for funding, you have to list who your business competitors are, even though those people might actually be your friends that you went to school with. It's quite strange, and actually we all have quite a lot of people in London have quite fragilely sized businesses, and actually maybe we should all just be helping each other rather than listing each other as competitors on application forms, especially as now we are living in a really different time, and even more so now since the pandemic. So in a way, Fashion on Earth, in a strange way, kind of sort of lay this collaborative path in place that was sort of ready to go when this situation happened. You know, I was already in touch with Bethany through doing this, etc. So it kind of weirdly precursed the fact that we'd have to do this. It sort of kind of slipped in, and a lot of the designers who are donating their time to us to sew are people that are also part of that space as well as lots of other people.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I love this idea of, you know, as you say, sort of almost pre-competitive, how can we all help each other? And that notion of sort of open source with information and knowledge sharing and everything is such a valuable but quite a different view for this industry. And just to stay with you just for one more moment, you obviously took that a step further and shared that a lot of the information about the way that you're sourcing and the way that you're building your collections through your last show, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the last 4 or 5 shows, you know, our press releases now become almost like a database that we give away. So all of the email addresses, contacts, fabric compositions, locations, collaborators, all of that, and then also all the definitions of all of the sustainability terminology, because that's not something that's within our fashion vocabulary yet, and it has increasingly become so as the seasons have gone by. But I think it's really important that if you have this really important information, that you're giving it away. You know, doing working in less damaging ways is working in a way that is trying to preserve life on Earth, and keeping that to yourself as a personal business USP isn't right. You know, that information should belong to everyone. All students should have the empowerment of having that knowledge, so that when they're doing their own work, eventually, when they're working with an industry, they have the knowledge to be able to choose how they want to work, whether they want to work in a planetary positive way or not, you know. But if we don't have that information, we can't make those informed choices. So it was about, you know, it took me a really long time to learn all that stuff. I had to take seasons out of Fashion Week, you know, in order to physically have the time to sit down with people to learn this. And not all companies have the luxury of being able to do that. And obviously now we have had this very unusual situation where a lot of us have had to stop, well, nearly all of us worldwide have had to stop and have a pause. But at that time it was unusual to do that, which was, I mean, 2 years ago, 1 year ago. So, you know, in order to kind of propel change along, just share the information you've spent ages researching, so other people don't have to stop and take the time to do that. So it was about a time efficiency as well, because people don't have time in fashion to stop often. Obviously now, you know, the world's very different, but at that time.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, well, it's a brilliant ethos. And Bethany, I know you're very heavily focused in this space as well. Obviously, your work is very much about this notion of closing the loop. Do you believe this idea of collaboration and that idea of sort of pre-competitive, as Phoebe talked to, is a big part of helping you on that journey and achieving those goals?
Yeah, I think like we're from a different really generation of like community of designers, and like who I've like graduated with, and like all the friends that I work with, we all kind of like, Helen Kirkham is like one of my really good friends, and she works on the footwear, like we kind of all work together and like share information. So I think, you know, if we've got a problem, or like even when we were first like graduating, it's like charging fees, or, you know, we didn't really know, and we've kind of like grown together. And I think it's a different way of working. Yeah, especially like sharing information, and, you know, not keeping it as, you know, your USP. I think it's important to share knowledge, and especially in sustainability, because everyone's kind of just learning. Like when no one knows everything, it's a completely new kind of territory. So I think if everyone can be as educated as possible, it's the best way to like move forward.
Absolutely, yeah, I couldn't agree more. And in your world then, with sort of this notion of closing the loop, you know, what's been I guess the biggest focus for you within that? Maybe you can just explain what that means even for the audience, and I guess what's been the biggest challenge with that as well.
So we work with only like organic or recycled content, but then we work with different social projects on manufacturing. So we work with one in Italy, 2 in the UK, and 1 in the Isle of Man, where I'm from. So it's kind of working with different community groups and social projects to manufacture elements of our garments. And then we usually work project-based, not seasonal. So we'll do 2 projects a year and try to usually like them to happen at men's. So we're on schedule for the buying calendar, but each collection will work with a charitable project and then donate 20% of our funds to the charitable project, and kind of become a voice and speak and give a voice to a charity, to a greater audience that they wouldn't necessarily be able to access. So that's kind of the work that we do.
Brilliant. So super commendable. Cosette, I think you were going to add something. Did you want to hop in?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, because I've come from basically a sort of menswear background. All my recent past has all been about menswear. And when we set up Sibling, we were tagged on to like the end of Fashion Week. Like menswear didn't even get a look in. It was like the last day of women's wear when everybody had left and gone to Milan. Yeah. So it's interesting listening to women's wear, predominantly women's wear designers, talking about collaboration and how designers collaborate with each other, because actually at that point in menswear, without a schedule, all of us menswear designers got together and started actively pushing, along with Dylan Jones and some other really big supporters, in getting this menswear like proper scheduling up and running. And in doing that, we were also sharing information. So if someone needed a knitwear factory, they would come to us. If we needed a denim factory, we would go to, I don't know, Matthew Miller or whoever. So what I love about things moving forward in fashion is that the women's wear feels like it kind of caught up with the sort of the camaraderie that happens already in menswear. People are less frightened. I mean, I used to see a lot of the women's wear designers, you know, Giles and Jonathan Saunders and Chris Kane and whoever, and we would be sharing information amongst ourselves, but that was kind of because we were mates and we were in a pub, you know. And I like the fact that now it's not seen as unusual. At the time, that was seen as a really unusual thing. So I think this is immensely cheering to hear that people are collating their information and sharing it, you know, without expecting anything back.
I think what's really interesting about what you've just said there is this idea that actually your collaboration kind of came from a need for it, which obviously is the same with exactly what you guys have set up together, and a lot of the work that everybody else on this in this conversation is doing too. But to stay with you, Cosette, on that note, I guess, you know, and I was going to bring up your work with Sibling, because by its very nature that was a collaborative effort. But what's been your experience through that and through your other work more broadly of how to make working together actually work? Because it's not exactly the most straightforward, especially at the moment where actually working together is only remotely anyway.
Yeah, it's really difficult. I mean, people used to question, like, how could Sibling be 3 people? Well, it's like, well, you know, Marc Jacobs is 300 people or 3,000 people, but it just had one figurehead. And we decided that actually we didn't want it to be on one person's shoulders. That's why we called it Sibling. It had to feel inclusive. And I'm very much, my ethos has always been about people feeling inclusive and people having a voice and feeling heard. And their skills, you know, you might not be good at picking up the telephone and pitching. You might be good at, you know, knitting or crocheting. It's kind of working to other people's skills, but you all have the main goal. And in the end, Sibling, the way we looked at it was, we had this, you know, PR fictional figure called Knit Monster, and it was as if we were working for Knit Monster. We were working for the brand, and you kind of had to leave your ego at the door because we were all working towards the same thing. So as I say, like, a lot of my work is that, especially with big companies. You go into a big company and you can see that there are things kind of falling apart and everybody's super stressed. And then you sit down with people normally around a table and say, you know, I'd like to hear what the person from the factory has to say, and I'd like to hear what the person from the range planning has to say, because it's all a supply chain and it all moves. And sometimes they're not getting along because it's a purely personal reason. And then it's, how do you support that person to feel that they're still working, that they're actually still important, that they're, you know, just because they're, I don't know, driving the van or what have you, does not mean that they're, you know, if they're not there, that there's this huge fall down in the supply chain. So I like to listen to people. I like to listen and then use my eyes, and just, you know, the trouble with the situation we're in now is it's very difficult to read body language, and it's and we're all kind of on our best behavior. Like, what I like to do is get as many people in a room at once, and then talk about their business or talk about their brand, and you can see from people's body languages or who's shutting somebody down by talking over them. You know, Zoom meetings have made everybody polite. You know, there's very little talking over people. There's very, you know, so it sort of makes my job a little bit more difficult. But without, you know, without technology, I don't know how, you know, how we would have got EDN moving, how, you know, there are different launches I'm doing with James Long from Iceberg at the moment, how that would have happened, you know, Fashion Week, you know, London Fashion Week is doing something in June and then again in September, you know, how to do sales even. I mean, the technology has been vitally important in this situation. You can't get the same feeling from a conference call or, you know, faxing someone. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. I know it's quite interesting, isn't it, to think about what this experience would have been like, you know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or even I was saying to somebody today, what would this very experience we're having now on this video call feel like in another 5 years' time, when it's probably so much more advanced. So, you know, it's super exciting to think actually maybe it will feel, maybe we'll be able to tell body language much better. Who knows? It'll be interesting to see. Holly, to come to you, your career has been made up of so many interesting collaborations across all sorts of different fields. I'd love you to share some of the best examples of things you've done, but also some of the things that you've learned the most from, and why, I guess.
Yeah, I guess it wasn't really an intentional part of my sort of mode operandi, if I'm honest, when I started the label. I started with a label that was women's wear based, but had a really strong signature in print. And it turned out that it was something that was quite applicable to a vast array of other things other than clothing. So pretty quickly I was kind of working with companies such as Smythson, for example, was a really early collaboration that we did, and sort of working not specifically within fashion, but just more within sort of design and within product categories. And that actually turned out to be probably one of the biggest joys of having my own brand for me as a designer, and to have the kind of access to those skill sets that I didn't have that depth of knowledge. I didn't know how to make the majority of these things. It was allowing me to kind of delve into completely new categories and to really expand my own horizons and really sort of broaden my creative vision through some of the projects that we're able to undertake. I think we've done over 60 to 70 different collaborations over the last 10 years with various brands. Some of them have run for 10 years, so we had a really good relationship before my very first show with Swarovski, for example. I did a collection for Atelier Swarovski jewellery, and then they supported our shows a lot over the time in various capacities. There were some that were, from a sort of blatantly self-indulgent point of view, incredibly satisfying. The one with our relationship with Christian Louboutin was one of them. There was nothing that was more pleasing than when 48 hours before your show, 60 pairs of Christian Louboutins done in your print, absolutely pristine, arrive. That was the moment that everyone was like, okay, we are going to make it. We are going to get it done. Have the finishing touch. There's some from a kind of more basic point of view that have been really interesting. We started working with John Smedley. I think that was spring summer 16. So to actually be able to work with UK manufacturers to kind of gain that insight from their own workers, some of whom have been there for over 40 years, was really quite a privilege. And again, to be able to go on site and to see them actually producing the pieces really expanded my kind of depth of expertise. And I think we committed in 2016 to making everything that we did under our own label within the UK as a kind of a move towards reducing our carbon footprint and thinking about the kind of the overproduction and mass consumption that is, prevalent within fashion, to just really kind of control what we were doing a little bit and make sure that we were collaborating in the right ways. So being very selective about who we were working with, but also choosing brands that could kind of further my skill set and still excite me as a designer, and also give my team some insight into different kind of areas and arenas that we hadn't worked in previously. So we started then working in interiors and showing our work in a really quite a different way. So creating kind of more 360 installations that allowed us a bit more of an insight into a sort of a world of graphics, if you like, rather than just kind of print on clothing. And that's really sort of where I've kind of found my niche that I enjoy the most, is being able to work in that diverse way. And it's a huge privilege for a designer to have the ability to do that. And, also, I think probably the biggest privilege for me has been building a team round about me that can support that. And that's as much my extended network as my immediate team, which is why things like working on the EDN has been so, this is a new team that I'm a part of. We've all got a different skill set. we're joking, I was thinking what you're saying about having these Zoom meetings. I've never actually met Bethany in the flesh.
Really?
Our relationship is purely digital, which for someone who's so bad at technology as myself is quite ironic. So there's things like that that are, this is obviously a very difficult time, but that's been a real kind of eye-opener on how things actually have been able to function really quite smoothly in what we've been doing. We've been quite reactive and things have come together quite quickly. So it's given me a bit of an insight into my own capabilities in terms of collaboration and just how much can be achieved even when circumstances are quite compromised.
That's absolutely amazing that you guys have never met. I love, that's a very good fact. Thank you for sharing that. Super interesting though, because as you say, like what you can achieve even without having met somebody in person. I think there's so many incredible examples of that happening right now. Also, Holly, I can't believe you've done that many collaborations in 10 years. It's phenomenal. And the amount of things you must have learned and about yourself, as well as obviously the process itself, must have been completely fascinating. I think one of the things that when I was thinking about this conversation with all of you, that really inspired me was about this idea of how you're approaching a lot of your work. I think what seems to sort of unite you is besides EDN obviously, is that you're approaching your work through this sort of lens of helping others as well, which I think is very commendable and is quite a different approach to traditionally the way the fashion industry sees things. Holly, just to stay with you for now, but I'd love any of the rest of you to weigh in as well. Do you think as public figures, which arguably you all are, do you think that there's a responsibility to do that, to help communities or people or the planet even, through whatever lens? Do you feel some sort of onus and ownership to need to?
Yeah, I think 100% that you have a sort of duty of care, if you like, to either pass on. But in my case, when I started my business, I had a huge amount of support. It was very contrary to my kind of initial conception of the fashion industry. I was part of Fashion East. Lulu Kennedy gave me unprecedented support to start my business. I lived in Scotland, so I was commuting to London. They lent me studios. She helped me. I was so naive that I turned up to my first fashion show with cash to pay the models. That was how little I knew about what was going to happen. And she really sort of guided me through that and introduced me to a lot of people that mentored me, companies. She introduced me to Bhutan, for example, and people that really kind of supported me and still do support me on that journey. So I think I immediately felt quite comfortable, if you like, within the fashion industry. It was much more receptive. I was very lucky when I was studying at the RCA to be mentored by Sarah Moore. So she still is very involved with, a touchstone for me. I would still be able to ask her advice and opinion. And that's 15 years ago since we met now. So I think there's a huge amount of goodwill and support there. It's just, as we said, it can be conceived as quite a competitive kind of realm, if you like, but my kind of experience has been very much about being part of these sort of collectives that are in a way kind of unnaturally formed. So Fashionista, where 3 designers are brought together to show. Then I moved into New Gen, which is when I met Cosette and Sibling. So we've known each other for 10, 12 years. So I really kind of was able to grow who and what I had access to through that. And I found that a lot of people were very, very willing to share the information about what they were doing. And in turn, I felt that everything that I was learning, I wanted to be able to pass on to other people that were just starting their businesses as well. And I've been very fortunate to work a lot within education and also, within mentoring as well. So I was a global ambassador for Graduate Fashion Week and able to try and pass on some of the things that I'd learned to designers that want to start their own business via that. And it was very much about being always realistic about the industry. It is incredibly difficult having your own label, but it's not like any other thing you can do. So it's about making people aware and helping them make informed decisions and supporting in terms of manufacturing and things like that wherever you can. But I think absolutely there's a real sense of handing down what you've been fortunate to have privy to the next generation coming up. And also within terms of UK industry, I kind of feel a real responsibility to make sure that I'm utilising that within my work, that I'm promoting that as much as possible. If I can make something here, I will. And, as we opted, we were making a lot of our pieces overseas previously. So it really, it compromised my creative vision to turn towards the UK. But in a way, that was the challenge that I enjoyed and that I kind of still relish. And it's so much more meaningful to me to be able to actually go and speak to people that are making these things. It makes my work better to have those relationships. And hopefully it aids their internal methodology and ethos as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's also just so much change happening right now, which must be impacting the way that you're doing that. And for all of you, in fact, in terms of your work, I'd love us to just spend a few minutes on that. And then I want to go back to EDN and what we can expect next from you guys. Phoebe, maybe to come to you on this, I'd love to just hear your thoughts and I guess your concerns about everything that's happening with fashion due to the pandemic and the sort of change. You know, obviously every day it feels like we're hearing new announcements from different brands and obviously some of the organizational bodies about, you know, what needs to change with the system that we work in. What's your view on what's going on and what's going to come out of all of this?
I don't know, it's strange because there's, you know, such conflicting sort of things happening. You know, there's markets opening up, but there's also big brands saying they're going to be doing less and they're going to be showing less. So I don't know what's going to exactly happen. I think it's very hard to predict, you know, how we will all be responding to this. I mean, if you look historically, most downturns and depression of economies then, you know, are responded to by big uplifts in, you know, excessive lifestyle purchasing, parties, you know, because people are so relieved, like physically relieved to come out of those experiences and want to celebrate with, you know, excess and those sort of things. So in my opinion, it could go either way. I feel like we've been making such important and good traction within the industry as a wider whole, in terms of, you know, the quite slow but quite real realization of what we had been contributing to and some of the practice that we had been doing and are still doing that, you know, isn't beneficial to the really fragile situation that we all are in terms of loss of biodiversity and global heating. So I hope this gives companies enough time to you know, to assess how they were working and maybe give them some time to think of some ways that they could be working in better ways that are more suited to the realities of the world that we live in now, rather than continuing to replicate a system that is kind of quite out of step to what the planet we live on now. So I'm personally hoping there'll be a shift. There's a lot of big announcements of, you know, moving off seasonality, moving away from seasonality, moving away from really big shows, moving away from pre-collections. You know, there's a huge amount of conversation flying around the industry about that, and, you know, potentially not using fashion weeks quite as regularly. So I think the industry's been ripe for a change for a very long time, and I think this will give, you know, this experience will be a catalyst for change. Whether it will be the level of change we need, I don't know, but I really hope it does give people the opportunity to be working in less wasteful and less damaging ways, and in more positive ways. And as we've seen with the EDN, there is huge positive things that you can do within design and making, and I hope that we can all as an industry keep hold of that. You don't necessarily have to be damaging things in order to make, use and enjoy fashion. You could actually be doing it in a different way, and this does give the industry an opportunity to disinherit some of the practices that it was perpetuating that potentially isn't really relevant or working for the people or the environment that we all live with and in. So I'm hopeful for change, but I can't personally predict which way it's going to swing. I hope there's some, you know, strong action behind some of these strong statements.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Bethany, anything to add from your perspective in your world?
Yeah, no, I think it's been really nice to have like a pause, and I think like a a lot from industry have been like asking for this pause moment. So yeah, I think it'll just be interesting how we re-enter. And I think like a lot of, you know, like the larger companies have been doing really amazing acts of kindness. But yeah, I just like hope it's not something that's just for the moment and it becomes part of their actual like business models moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, talking of business models then, Cosette and Holly, I'd love to come to the two of you to just before we close out. What's next for EDN? What can we expect? You know, if life is going to go quote unquote back to normal, do you guys keep making scrubs? What happens with the initiative and what you're doing?
Yeah, I think the kind of the next step for us is we wanted to make sure that we were kind of creating a bit of a sort of legacy from what we've kind of discovered, because, you know, it's been a very sharp learning curve for not just us, but everyone else that's been involved in the project. So we've collated a lot of information, a lot of contacts are there, everyone's network has expanded tenfold. So I think to make sure that we had a really solid record of that, you know, can be utilised in the future. In terms of the actual production of what we're making, we were conscious that we wanted to fulfill as much capacity as required for scrubs. So we're still producing that, but we also wanted to look at more kind of sustainable, reusable solutions that might be applicable for PPE manufacture within the UK. So at the moment, I've just actually heard just before this that we've managed to create a sample of a heat-sealed reusable gown, which would be able to be washed up to sort of 10 times, that we'll be trying at the Royal Free Hospital next week. So that to us seemed to be a really fitting kind of, not an end, but a fitting kind of project to kind of steer the EDN towards creating something that can be a much more kind of agile solution to a PPE shortage if it should ever occur in the future, but definitely looking at reusable, sustainable solutions for that. And we've also become a bit of a kind of hub for redistributing PPE as well. So we've actually took charge of 50,000 surgical grade face masks that have been donated to us. So we're kind of distributing that and working with a couple of charities, MedSupply UK and Shield, and with organisations throughout the UK to try and distribute that as much as possible and make sure that every organisation from the Royal Free Hospital to the care homes, any kind of level or tier of the sector that requires assistance is being heard, because a big part of the problem seems to be that a lot of voices have been overshadowed by the bigger operations. So making sure that we're kind of touching in as conscientiously as we can on every level that we have access to. Again, kind of reiterating that all-inclusive approach, trying to do that with the skills and knowledge that they've accrued to as great a degree as we can.
Yeah, that's amazing, and how incredible distributing all of those as well. Cosette, presumably your role continues to take this work onto bigger and better things again, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that is really important is, you know, it is a political thing. So, you know, in government, the fashion industry and the garment industry, manufacturing especially, has been left to kind of rot in a lot of ways. So it's interesting to note that, you know, we do have the factory system here, and there are people that are willing to think about potentially not even making the product that they were set out to make in the first place. There was something on the UKFP's LinkedIn page today talking about they've got this new kind of like sewing initiative, taking on from everybody sewing or factory sewing. And again, it's about collating information and actually getting sewers and people back into industry, because a lot of these factories, I've visited a lot of the factories in the UK and knitwear factories especially, you know, the workforce is in their 60s, and it's like there's nobody young coming through. So hopefully doing something like this, working for us or for Scrub Hubs, has potentially made a few more of the younger people think that this is a good industry to go in, and that they'll want to continue it that way. And then the last thing is to question government's constant, you know, breaking funds and reducing funds for fashion schools, for arts, for, you know, all of that type of thing. It's obviously become very apparent with this that, you know, you need people that know how to make a garment, and you know, that we should really question, you know, why arts is seen in a certain way or fashion is seen in a certain way. And I'm hoping that it will just be taken a little bit more seriously.
Amazing, thank you. To everybody watching, if you have questions, we have about 10 minutes where you're welcome to ask these guys anything. Please just pop it into the Q&A box. Before we do that and invite Rosanna back to host that part of the conversation, we always like to end our conversations on an optimistic note. I mean, I think this whole conversation has been phenomenally optimistic, which has been wonderful. But one of the things that we're doing with FashMash is really focusing on this idea of hope. So I'd love to just come to each of you in turn. If you could give me one sentence summing up, you know, what your hope is for the industry ahead. Can be related to the pandemic, and of course be related to EDN, or also more broadly. I'd love to hear from each of you in turn, if you would be willing. I'll just go with what order you are on my screen. So Holly, if we were to come to you first, not to put you on the spot, but what would your hope be for the industry?
My hope would be that we can continue this kind of amazing collective spirit that we've managed to achieve through the EDN, and see it filter into more kind of mainstream design and creative arts. In a sense, there's been a huge sort of flow of goodwill and, you know, involvement and support. And I think it's shown me, as I said, what we can achieve on kind of reduced means. And I think it'd be very important to continue this in some capacity for the positive aspects that it has on our own practice and us collectively.
Amazing, thank you. Bethany, what about you?
Yeah, I think for me I think it's been a really great moment of pause. So I think for me, for the industry, it's going back, but not going back as business as usual.
Cosette, over to you.
I just hope people talk to each other and listen to each other more within industry. That would be, it'll probably put me out of a job, but that's what I would like. I'd like people to be more aware of the others that they work with, and their importance to something that's bigger than them.
Amazing, yeah, couldn't agree more. Phoebe, last but not least.
Yeah, I think over the last couple of years, we've seen this quite terrifying rise of the right worldwide. And I think you have seen in response to that an increasing amount of businesses trying to fill that gap. And I believe that business is part of society. Businesses are part of society. So yeah, I hope that we continue to see more and more businesses taking part and being active within issues that operate beyond their immediate business. For example, the people that are within the vicinity of where they work, the space that is affected by the work that they make within that vicinity, etc., etc., and just have a greater awareness beyond just overheads and USPs and exponential growth. Yeah, a greater awareness beyond the workspace as it is.
Brilliant. Thank you so much to all of you. I want to open it to Q&A. So let's invite Rosanna back to join us. Oh, that was very seamless. Hello. Welcome back.
Finger at the ready. I was good to go. We have got some great questions through, and if anybody has any more, please do send them. I'm going to begin with one from, and actually I should say, obviously there are 4 of you, we're not used to this format, so do all try to not talk over each other. You've been very good at that so far. Or one of you may prefer to take the question yourself. So first question is from Piav Wetchi. I hope I pronounced the name correctly. How can smaller community groups who have been making scrubs on a local level get involved? How can we share useful information about the industry to qualified local people with skills who would like to go back to work or want to hear more about opportunities? Who would like to take that?
I'll answer. Everyone else was too scared. We have touched in with a lot of kind of local level groups in the process of kind of bringing together the emergency designer network. So I think if, you know, we're very happy for groups to connect with us. We can't promise that we're going to be able to answer everything that you just kind of listed that they're looking for, but I think we, at the end of this, or the end of the immediate kind of crisis, if you like, our intention is to kind of have an event where we can bring everyone who's worked on this at every level together. And that provides opportunity for people to exchange information, obviously for me to meet Bethany in person, and, you know, just talk and sort of make those connections. As Cosette said, it's really just about being vocal. It's about saying what you need. I guess because I'm used to working in fashion, I quite like people to be quite frank. So if people need money, if they need fabric, if they want to know if we can help them get jobs, you know, just be kind of straight up with what your needs are. And I think people are kind of more, within fashion, are more receptive to that. They like a kind of honest, no time wasting approach. So I think groups are more than welcome to get in touch with us, and we can kind of connect them in as part of our bigger network. And like I said, if they have specific needs, we can definitely try to answer that.
And also they should join the UKFP. They should look at the UKFP website. And if they are thinking of going into like industry using their sewing skills, then this new initiative that they've set up, and UKFP FP is like a government body, but I like them. They're slightly rebellious. They're the rebellious side of government. So they should check that out as well. And, you know, get on LinkedIn and all of those industry sites, and just sort of make yourself aware. Just give, you know, as Holly said, give a voice to what you want.
Thank you. Here's to rebelliousness and frankness in fact. Okay, Hannah, thank you for your question. I believe that was actually answered earlier on. So that was all about what is next for the EDN. Unless anyone has anything to add to that, raise your hand if you do, but I think you guys covered that amply. One from Katie S. So wonderful to hear that Phoebe talk about sharing her supplier database with others. If she were keen to share it more widely, we'd love her to upload the data set to the Open Apparel Registry, and she's put a link. So I think that's more of a statement rather than a question, but thank you very much for that, Katie, and I'll be sure to send the link to Phoebe. Then from Juliet Hard, thank you, Juliet, she's a regular attendee in real life at our events. What do you think about the BFC and CFDA's proposal today to show during the regular fashion calendar, and it's only one of the global fashion capitals going forward?
I think it's an interesting thing, because we also had the news that Gucci weren't going to show during the fashion calendar and everything like that. You know, which is great if you're Gucci, and it's great if you're Saint Laurent and you don't want to show as part of a calendar. I think what we have to all be very wary of is that if we don't stick to fashion calendars, we get back to the same problem of if we get back to doing traveling and doing showrooms and all of that type of stuff, we then start this treadmill again. We then start, I mean, I can start doing fashion weeks in September and I don't get a heads up until March, because the fashion calendar is like that. It's completely like running round and round and round. So we have to be very careful with this talk of let's get rid of like fashion calendars completely, because actually it doesn't work for some people. It works for others. If it works for them, great. But often, especially if you're a small designer, it's the only way you can get seen. And you know, the BFD and the other bodies, worldwide fashion bodies, you know, they do offer assistance and support. So for me, I'd be very wary of dissing that too much, because I think it's still important, and I think they still do have a relevance, if only just to bring buyers and press eventually when this all happens, but brings buyers and press to see things all at once, rather than a buyer or a press person getting on a plane every 2 seconds to go and see, you know, this show over here and this show over here and this show. I mean, if it's all virtual, then that, you know, I won't have those concerns. But I do think that, and also for people's mental health reasons, we shouldn't have to work 24 hours a day, you know, 300 and whatever, sometimes it feels like 485 days a year, because we work in the fashion industry. So to regulate it and to keep these kind of rules in place and these schedules in place, I think is just, it will just make life easier, or at least the transition period a lot easier for a lot of people.
Thank you, and very well put, thinking about the non kind of Gucci Boom style brands. Does anyone have anything to add to that question? Or I think Cosette's phrased it perfectly. So the only other one that we have in is from Jenny Maniva, which is more just a statement, but she said, absolutely brilliant conversation. Thank you guys so much. If there's any way for other designers to help and get involved, I'd be delighted to. So I think did Holly cover that at the beginning of the conversation? I'm now having a mind blank. Yes, she did. So we will share details of that shortly after. So I'm now going to hand back to Rachel for a final quick-fire question. I just wanted to say thank you all so much. First of all, to our pioneers today, you have inspired me, and it's felt very intimate, actually. It's been kind of amazing doing it in a webinar form. And then thank you also to our attendees for donating to such a brilliant cause. If you would still like to donate, I know it is a difficult time for all of us and we can't all do that. It's very uncertain. I agree, a huge heart. You know, £6 is a scrub. So just I think for context, that really says a lot. And thank you for your donations. Rachel and I are huge believers in this cause, and we have donated also. So right, handing back to Rachel, quick fire, off you go. I'm going to go on mute.
So we always end our pioneers with a quick fire round. Normally it is with one person, as you know, and super quick, but we're going to do it a bit differently today because it's just 4 of you. I'm going to ask one question and I'd love you to just each give me a quick immediate answer as to your thoughts, and we will then close out. We'll go, let's be mean to Phoebe this time. We'll go the other way around. Sorry, Phoebe. If you could collaborate with one fashion luminary or otherwise from history, who would it be?
A liar. Or Charles Worth. Or Charles James. They're all on the shelf. 3.
Brilliant.
Can I pick 3?
You can have 3. Why not? Cosette, what about you?
Gautier. I'm a massive fan, and whether he likes it or not, I've met him 3 times, and the 3 times I've met him have always turned out, my life has turned around by something he said, which is quite weird, and he'll probably get a restraining order on me, but yeah, Gautier.
Brilliant. Bethany, what about you?
I maybe say Vivienne Westwood. Yeah, there we go.
Amazing. Love all of these names. Holly, last but not least.
I would like to collaborate with Elizabeth first. Not strictly a designer, but an utter maximalist and a powerhouse woman.
Brilliant. Love it. What a fabulous end. Thank you all again so much for joining us. To those listening, please donate, please share to help other people encouraged to donate as well. And thank you again so much for your time, and we look forward to following your progress and supporting you as it continues. Thank you again, everyone. Bye.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.